I'm curious on your y-axis there. So this is percent of CPI because it seems like it's in stark contrast to what's being published.
Yes, this is cumulative. Yeah, this is
Oh,
cumulative.
okay, it's cumulative. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is between 1775 and all the way up to 2012. So it's not quite up to date today. So it's even higher than here. But what we can see for those that are perhaps listening audibly is that we more or less have a flat line that goes up and down a little bit from 1775 all the way up until 1913. World War One, we have a dramatic increase in inflation, spending. Of course, fighting a war here in Europe. And after World War One, that goes down, and World War Two it increases again. And in the 1970s, and specifically 1971, the CPI just kind of completely falls off the rails here. And the reason for this, for those that may not know, is that the United States has had multiple monetary standards in the course of its history. Before the Federal Reserve, we had two central banks. Neither of them exist anymore, of course. We've actually had two hyperinflationary events on U.S. soil. And what we have here now is we have a new monetary standard. In 1913, we had the creation of the Federal Reserve, the current central bank of the United States. And in 1944, we had the Bretton Woods Agreement, which basically pegged the U.S. dollar to gold. And we'll get to that more in a moment. But 1971 here is really the year that is applicable to most people's lives watching, the everyday person. That should be a date that most people know, but it's not taught in schools for reasons I won't get into here. But basically, the reason it's important is because it detached the US dollar from gold. And as we were discussing monetary eras before, gold was an improvement on former monies. And one of the reasons that gold has been such a good form of money for so long is because it's an extremely high brute force physical cost to create more gold. It's extremely expensive to create more gold. Now, granted, as the value of gold goes up, the economic incentive to mine more gold increases. So, of course, there's always going to be more gold dumped onto the market. This is just a factor of the free market. If price adjusts up, more gold will be produced. If price goes down, less gold will be produced, and then that increases value. So, meaning price goes up. This is just how gold works. But the problem with detaching a fiat currency from something with a brute force physical cost like gold or oil or some other tangible thing is you divorce, this abstract concept of money, which is just a ledger of trust from reality. And now we're no longer trusting that the US dollar is pegged to something real. We're just trusting that the US dollars, that, it's refundable. We're trusting people that issue it, that they're not going to issue it in an unlimited fashion. And of course, the problem with humans is that we're all sinful, we're all broken, and we're all corrupt. And so as soon as you detach gold from a fiat currency, all of a sudden, guess what? Promises start being broken, and you see this runaway inflation statistic here. So what we see is that as technology is progressing and demographics began shifting 50 years ago due to technology and prosperity post World War II, we saw that the United States basically said, hey, we can't make our obligations with this gold peg, and we have to detach. And so that's what they did, and that's why we see this massive inflation spike.
I would love to see from 2010 outward what this would look like, because it looks like this only goes out to about 2010 on the chart. I could imagine if you added the next 13 years in there, what what angle it'd be looking like right now. And that's assuming we trust the reported CPI numbers that are being told to us.
Yes, definitely. That's trusting those numbers. And the whole idea, for those, especially the younger folks like myself, something I think I should say is that the whole idea of accounting for inflation is a new idea. If we find the occurrence of adjusted for inflation in books all the way back to 1800, here in this chart, you can see a clear spike in the early 1970s where the term, quote unquote, adjusted for inflation becomes apparent. And the whole reason, Preston, that we have this is because we have a ledger that is not consistent. It makes no sense. Even in the charts we were looking at earlier, when we adjust for poverty or adjust for GDP per capita, we have to adjust for inflation. Mm-hmm. And the reason we have to adjust for inflation is because what is money? Money is the unit at which we determine and communicate value to one another. And if you change the inherent supply of money, you corrupt that metric. You make it inconsistent. You make it unreliable. A good metaphor I like to give is that of like a meter stick. If I had an inflation rate for the meter stick where I inflated or debased the length of a meter stick, every architect and everyone that measures anything in the world would have to continually adjust their blueprints and their plans based on the changing of the length of the meter stick. And that might be a crude analogy, but that's the basic idea here. When you have a system, a ledger, a monetary system that's supposed to represent all the wealth in the world, and then you create more money or destroy money and you artificially change it, well, what do? All you do is you corrupt everything. You make prices, which is the communication mechanism at which we determine value. You make it inherently corrupted, and you basically cause this inherent communication breakdown in every layer of society. So what we're looking at.
I really like some of Michael Saylor's thoughts on inflation, where he's talking about it being a vector, and for each person, it's different. So like your inflation rate is different than my inflation rate, just because we have totally different spending habits. We have different things that we value. And so for every person in the US or around the world, this is something that I think plays into the hand of the manipulators, of the currency manipulators that are adding extra units onto the ledger. Is they can publish these numbers, and it's really hard for one person to say, oh, that's not accurate, because it all comes down to the weighting of every single individual person and what they preface as being important or not important. But yeah, I love this. This is a great point.
Yeah, and that's really true. One of the reasons there's so much noise in the financial space, especially those in the financial space will know what I'm about to say, but there's so much talk about interest rates constantly. Pretty much everyone's heard about interest rates and this and that, it yields and blah, 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 and it doesn't really make sense to them. And basically, to cut through the noise and get to the signal and root of it all, what's happening here is that the price of money is changing. And so every time that Jerome Powell or some other, central figure of this board that changes the supply of money, whenever they come out and say, this is the price of money, or this is how we're going to change this, and what they're basically doing is they're repricing everything. And that's why the market is so volatile and increasingly more volatile as the economy becomes more and more dependent, as debt increases, become more dependent on that price of money changing, and markets react in a greater and greater degree to that. So as we have these people that announce the change of the measure of value in the system, that's why so many news outlets, that's why people get paid so much money to try to predict what these folks are going to do. Because to be able to predict that, if you can predict what the Federal Reserve or any issuer of currency is going to do, you can pretty much predict anything. The problem is, though, of course, nobody can predict what they're going to do because they're humans, and you can't trust humans.
I'm glad that you're taking the time to learn about Bitcoin, learn about Bitcoin's potential future value, both in terms of political currency units and on society as a whole. And I'm really glad that you're taking the effort to study and educate yourself about Bitcoin. However, I must make this message incredibly clear. If you are learning about Bitcoin, you must begin also learning about self-custody and taking possession of your own keys. This is really, really important. You can watch as many YouTube videos as you want, talking about how Bitcoin is going to skyrocket in fiat price and how the number is going to go up. You can talk about that all you want. You can daydream about this kind of vertical spike action for Bitcoin. You can daydream about this all you want. But my encouragement to you is that this is not a meme. This is not something to be taken lightly. We can think that this is a good thing, and it is a good thing ultimately for Bitcoin's long-term adoption, but this is real. Okay, this really happens in countries. It may not happen in your country for some time. It may happen in a stair-step fashion, but this is not a meme. This is not a joke. And so, therefore, you need to take self-custody really, really seriously, okay? I work full-time in self-custody solutions for people. I help people set up their multi-sig vaults. I help people set up their estate plans. I help people with a collaborative custody partnership and collaborative custody models, okay? This is a chart of the amount of interest we have at the Bitcoin Advisor, the company I work at, okay? This is not me personally. This is the whole company. We've been in business 7 years. Not a single client of ours has ever lost a single sat, okay? We have a good number of clients, and this is our demand. My point in showing you this chart, my point in showing you this message right now is that it is increasingly urgent, increasingly important that you begin taking self-custody very seriously. I'm telling you, I'm on the inside of this all day, every day, 6 days a week, and demand for self-custody is skyrocketing, okay? The kinds of clients we have, the number of clients we have, the conviction in the clients we have, it is only going up, okay? And people are booking meetings with me weeks, okay, in advance. In some cases, over a month in advance. And we are in bear market, okay? This chart right here is from October 2023. Okay, bear, like incredible low interest globally in Bitcoin. and our demand is still skyrocketing, it's still spiking. And my encouragement is that if we have a bull run, if we have parabolic spikes such as this, where Bitcoin goes rapidly upwards in terms of price, if we have these periods of time, okay, transaction fees are going to spike. Okay, exchanges are going to halt withdrawals. Okay, people are going to panic. They're going to smash buy any price. Okay, it's going to be increasingly difficult to have any time with people to help you in your self-custody setups. So first and foremost, whatever you do, whether you work with me at the Bitcoin Advisor, whether you go somewhere else, whether you figure it out on your own, whatever the case, please start figuring out self-custody, hot wallets, cold wallets, cold wallets, single sig, multi-sig, whatever you do, just start figuring it out now, because I'm increasingly alarmed by the number of Bitcoiners that do not have self-custody. So please, if you have any Bitcoin self-custody, but especially if you have a large amount of Bitcoin in self-custody, please start taking this stuff seriously, because it's only going to be increasingly important in the future. And so if you'd like to work with me, if you'd like to hear my opinions, perspectives, and ideas on this topic, you can find me at the Bitcoin Advisor. This is precisely why I work at the Bitcoin Advisor, because I believe this is such an important topic here, okay? You can find me there. You can have expert guidance on how to self-custody Bitcoin, to buy, secure, and store it properly for the long term. We can have tailored strategies for you, what your long-term vision is, both for yourself, your own individual future, your retirement, and for your future generations as well. Again, multi-sig vaults, estate plans, all these things for you. Okay, you can just book a free meeting with me here, and the link down below in the description. Again, the first consultation is completely free, where we can talk about your priorities and see if there's a value add both for you and for the Bitcoin Advisor as well. And again, our goal is to help you have generational wealth for you and your loved ones and your children without losing sleep. Okay. And that's why not only do you get a free initial consultation, but you have dozens and dozens of pages of education about multi-sig, self-custody, how to store your Bitcoin properly, things to avoid, things to pursue. Okay. Again, dozens and dozens of pages of free education for you to be learning about this increasingly important, increasingly urgent topic. Okay. And then you can learn further about the Bitcoin Advisor, and why we provide much more value for half the cost of our competitors. You can learn about all this and more in that link in the description, where you can book a free consultation with me at the Bitcoin Advisor. So again, whatever you do, whether you work with me at the Bitcoin Advisor or you try to figure out on your own, please just start taking action now. Because in a couple of years, higher and higher net worth people are going to be entering the space and demanding self-custody. Okay, more and more companies, more and more charities, more and more pension funds, more and more churches, all these things, all these groups of people, all these entities are going to be coming into Bitcoin very quickly, and they'll be willing to pay the transaction fees. They'll be willing to pay whatever fiat price and get for their sats. They'll be willing to do the self-custody as fast as possible. And so my encouragement to you, again, I'm glad you're enjoying these videos. I really appreciate you subscribing and commenting, being a part of these videos, and increasing your Bitcoin education. But please, please, please do not stop at the end of this video. Immediately after you watch the end of this video, please start taking your self-custody seriously, whether that's with me at the Bitcoin Advisor, again, link in the description, or it's on your own. Whatever the case, please just do it. Thank you.
Go to your next slide here, Luke. I like this next slide. This is really simple, but I think that it hammers home the point that, you know, when you have corrupt money, it basically corrupts the incentives, and then it corrupts society and all of the decision-making that's taking place in there. I really like this. It's simple, but it works great.
Thank you. Yeah. For those that are listening audibly, basically what you have is this premise of corrupting money. So basically corrupting the ledger. And then when you do that, you corrupt the incentives. Because if you incentivize people to predict the change of monetary policy, well, what are you doing? You're incentivizing less attention towards productivity and improving technology, and thus making the world a better place for more and more people. And you're increasing the incentive to predict that. And this is why you're seeing so much more speculation today. And this is why you see so many more gamblers today, and, you know, people obsessed with the lottery, you know, continually over 50 years, people are becoming, even though technology is getting better and better, and we're more prosperous than ever before, people are becoming more and more dependent on gambling and speculation and all that, because we've corrupted the incentives in every layer of the world. Even in the investing world, you know, things are just so crazy compared to what they were in the past. And so when you corrupt those incentives, you corrupt the society. Because a society inherently has to think shorter and shorter term, less and less long-term thinking, a lower and lower savings rate. And eventually, you know, when you corrupt the society enough and you have brains retrained to think in more zero-sum game thinking and short-term thinking, you then again corrupt the incentives, and you again corrupt them. It's just this horrible feedback loop. And we see this again and again. Of course, there are infamous examples of Germany and Rome and all sorts of other times in history, which I won't get into because it's quite a bleak picture, although it's extremely predictable in